This module is on documentation of the discharge notes. All of the documentation requirements and guidelines are found in the Medicare Benefit Policy Manual. Manual 100-2 includes more than 20 chapters, and Chapter 15 is the one that describes what is required in outpatient PT, OT, and ST services. This chapter, however, is named Covered Medical and Other Health Services, so when you go to find it, look for that one, and then go to Section 220 and 230 where you will find the therapy guidelines. National Government Services is the local Medicare administrative contractor for the state of Illinois. Therefore, you can find more guidance on its website. They have published a local coverage determination for outpatient PT and OT services, which all Part B providers of therapy in Illinois should be aware of. So throughout this module, there is additional guidance included from it. I did not include the web link for NGS because it is too long. If you Google search NGS for Illinois, you will be able to find it. NGS says that a discharge note is required for each episode of treatment and that it must be written by the clinician. That means the PT, OT, or SLP. They go on to say that it should cover the entire episode of care, from the last progress report up to the date of discharge. Lastly, this is the last opportunity to justify the medical necessity of the entire treatment episode. So you do this through objective and subjective measures on the discharge summary. Now, even in the case of an unanticipated discharge, there should be a discharge summary, and NGS says that the clinician can base those judgments based on the treatment notes and verbal reports of the assistant if they have been the one treating the patient. Now, if an assistant is treating and only 1 or 2 visits are needed after the therapist does a progress report, then the PT and OTA can make the last visit, but the clinician must still sign off on the decision to discharge. So it needs to be clear in that last note what the PTA and OTA are writing and what the PT or OT are writing. So let's look at a few examples. This is an example of a note that was sent to the physician on the last visit of the patient. So again, it's hard to tell what this is telling the physician without additional information. We know what the care connection scores are, and it looks like there's been an increase, but there's no comments provided as to what that should tell the physician about whether goals were met, the patient's able to do what they were doing before, the physician's goals for the patients have been met. And then the goals achieved, we do have percentage achieved, but again, an improvement in walking quality and tolerance, 90% achieved. So what does that mean? And if the improvement in subjective complaints of pain was only 90% achieved, then what does that mean? So we need to think about what our documents are telling the physician when we're sending them. This is another example. This provides a clear picture of the status towards the goals and why some goals were not completely met. So we have 95% achieved, but the comments explain that we have 52 degrees of extension without pain, and they almost reached the goal, and they feel like if they continue with their HEP, then they will continue to get those last 3 degrees of motion. Again, on the second goal, 90% achieved. The therapist put down the degrees of rotation right and left, and again, continue with HEP for continued gains. And then goal number 3 was 100% met, and the therapist has provided some context for what this means. Laundry, gardening, yard work. So it provides a clear picture of what the patient is able to do now as a result of therapy that she was not able to do previously. Again, the discharge summary provides an opportunity to wrap up the whole story, to provide a clear picture from beginning to end, to show the value of the visits, and in some cases provide justification for why the patient required more visits or a longer duration than another. It gives the therapist an opportunity to describe perhaps a modification or a transition into a maintenance program or a home exercise program. Having a good discharge summary is valuable for patients who may be returning to see you for chronic conditions. That way you can easily determine whether the patient has made demonstrable declines, as well as knowing what worked and what didn't work for the patient in previous episodes. This is even more important in a value-based world, where utilization of visits becomes a key factor in choosing providers. And that concludes our module on discharge notes.